Hi guys, welcome to today's session of Let's Build It Together. So in our last session, we would have configured the SRX, we would have discussed how it's plug and play by default and how to edit some of the configurations. So in today's session, we are going to go through FortiGate 60E. This is also plug and play, so it does have some default configurations on it that you can use. So what we are going to do first is go through it. So this device is actually factory defaulted. There isn't nothing set up on it. So right now I'm plugged into port 7. You can plug into any port between 1 and 7 to get the HTTP IP to be able to manage the device. The default IP on this device, excuse me, as you can see on the URL is 192.168.1.99. So, and the username is admin. So there's admin and no password. So when you log in, the first screen you would get is this. Now you don't have an old password, but you can set a new password. Right. So once this is done, you re-log in and should be, first part of it is done. Now we aren't going to actually register FortiGate or anything like that. You need internet access for that. And we have not gotten to that point of it yet. So we are going to begin. The only thing we are going to do is set up a host name. So we'll call this and we are going to register with FortiGate. So we'll do this later. So it's a 60E, not a 60D, my bad. So this is what the default dashboard looks like. You have your system information, your uptime, and your serial number and things like that. When there's additional code, again, once you're connected to the internet, you would see the different upgrade options that you have. Again, no licenses would show up because I didn't register the device. So what we are going to do is go through the high-level setup of the default configurations. So by default, you have a couple things. You have your default LAN, which I would show you now. So on FortiGate, you have things called hardware switches. A hardware switch is basically a grouping of interfaces that you can apply the same configurations to, more or less. So this hardware switch, the IP is the 1.99 IP, and it's a hardware switch, and these are the services that are allowed. So if we go into internal, what we are going to do later on is take off all of those interfaces except one. We'll leave one in the default for management, and we'll take off the rest for configuration. So again, the IP is 1.99, and these are the services that you would have. Normally, I would take off stuff like HTTP because it's not as secure as HTTPS, but for now, we'll leave it there. Again, you have your HTTP range. Because the IP is 1.99, they started their scope from 1.110 to 1.210. So they are giving out sufficient IPs. So this is one thing that's there. The other thing is the WAN 1 and WAN 2 interfaces. So by default, you have two WAN interfaces or internet interfaces that you can use. It's plug and play. Again, they are set up to DHCP so that whatever address you get from the provider, you can use. And you have ping allowed. I would have had ping allowed in the SRX as well to make sure that you could reach the provider's gateway. And then 1, 2 would be the same configuration. You can edit the descriptions. You can put a shorter name so that it'll be easy for you to spot. So if you have two different providers, you can add a description saying that 1 is this provider, 1, 2 is the other provider. Okay. By default, we also have SD1. No, not SD1, we have policies. I would go through what an SD1 is in a lower video. So I have one policy, well, two policies. There's an implicit deny policy, which is everything you're denying. That's usually your last policy on the list, because how the policies work is it would create in whatever order you create it, but then you need to reorder it so that the first policy at the top of the list is what users would hit first, and then it will filter like that. So right now we have a policy from internal, which is the hardware switch that I would have shown you, to 1. So that's for internet access. So it's a source all, destination all, service all, and then accept. Let me just And then we have stuff like NAT enabled. I discussed NAT in the previous video. And we have no SSL inspection and UTM. So I'll just give you a quick run through of some of the high level stuff for the really nice things that you can configure on the device. So what the SD1 does, the SD1, so if you have the multiple providers, it'll basically combine both links into a single link basically, and you'll be able to control traffic via volume or via the amount of sessions. So if you have a bigger link, you could direct most of the traffic over the bigger link rather than straining one link, and then if the link fails, then you switch over to the secondary link. Basically, you use all the links at the same time, and so if a link fails, nobody's going to notice because it'll just automatically transfer all the sessions or the traffic to the secondary link, and you wouldn't have a problem. Now, as you can see, the FortiGates are mostly GUI based. You do have a CLI that you can run some configurations on. Like for example, I would shut down stuff from here. Sometimes I build a script for policies and it just run a script here, so it's a lot faster. But typically it's a lot of GUI based. Again, you have your SD1 rules to make sure that nothing, to match your traffic, to make sure that nothing fails. You have your performance SLA that'll keep pinging, for example, a Google IP to make sure the latency isn't high, because SD1 measures stuff by latency. So again, if it realizes a link is high in latency or has a lot of failures, it would transfer all the traffic to the secondary link, and no customer would notice. You wouldn't even notice. Again, your VPN, they have VPNs that you can set up site to site. VPNs, there's a GUI for that. It's really intuitive, and it helps you step by step to create stuff like that. Yes, VPN obviously is for your remote access users. So if you want to work from home or work from a coffee shop, wherever it is, you can actually set up your VPN with split tunneling so that it's more secure than just having a user come into your network and use your internet connection. It would make more sense for a user to use, for example, at home, use your home internet connection to browse the internet and just use the SSL VPN to access resources rather than using the corporate internet access for everything. And then obviously you have Wi-Fi and switch controller allows you to manage FortiAPs and manage the Forti switches. So with FortiGate, it's like a single pane of glass where you manage everything from your FortiGate device. If you have multiple FortiGates, there's also the Forti manager, and everything, like I say, it's a single pane of glass, so you manage everything from the same place. And then you have a monitoring platform where you can see all your routing, DHCP, SD1, your VPN stats, and your clients. So I'm going to go straight into the configuration now. The first thing we are going to do, like I said, is remove all of the ports from the hardware switch with the exception of port 7, because that is the port I am currently using to manage the device. So to do that, we just need to hit the X and 6, and we'll leave that as is. Okay. Great. So as you can see, all the ports now show up here, so we don't have a problem. We will leave this as is. So we're going to use port 1 for our access, which is our VLAN terminating the firewall. So this will be the port that will connect to the switch. Now, I cannot remember what IP we were supposed to set. Let me just pull up my script so I can see the IP that we set. All right. So it's going to be this. No. Right, this is the IP that we are going to set for the LAN. So I'll just copy across that IP. And the role of this is going to be LAN. Now, the purpose of the role is just that, so if you have, so my choice was LAN. So it removed all the parameters that doesn't pertain to LAN. So if I go back to WAN, you would see the options would change. So that's the purpose of the role, LAN. And my alias is going to be internet access link. And we are going to create an object for it. This would help us when we need to tie things to policies. So once you select this option, it'll automatically create the address in the address book. We are going to allow ping. We could take our 40 telemetry. Use VDOM setting. We don't want DHCP. And that should be all. Now use VDOM setting. So what a VDOM is, it's a virtual domain in FortiGate. So what you can do is actually set up, you can split the firewall into 2 different firewalls basically with different policies, different routing and everything like that. You could use them for monitoring, which would be in a transparent mode VDOM, or you could use it in routing mode, which is the default mode. By default, you have a single VDOM, which is root, and that's where everything happens. If you want to have a multi-VDOM configuration, you need to enable it and then go from there. I'm not going to go into that. Right, so this is the first thing done. So our internet, which is 1.1, we would use 1.1, is already set up on DHCP. We aren't going to change that for now, and then we have our internal. The next thing we need to do is create our addresses. So we go under policy and objects, addresses. So what I'll do, I'll create the addresses and then create an address group so that when we're referencing it in our policy, we can actually tie it in. So let's go create new address. The name of this will be, no, I'm sorry, I don't remember all of these things off the top of my head. So I'll just use the script for purposes of knowing which is which. So user, so we'll call this user. User, it's a subnet, and it would be 192.168.20.0/24. Again, by enabling static route configuration, it would automatically create the route for you so that you don't need to go back and do it. All right, so that's one address. And the address should show up. User, this is it. Right, so we're gonna create another one. We're gonna call this voice. 192.168.30.0/24. And then we have corp Wi-Fi 40.0/24. And then we have guest Wi-Fi, which is 50.0/24. Okay, so now we are going to create the address group. So we are going to call our address group LAN subnets. We're going to add the members, user, voice. We'll add corp Wi-Fi, guest Wi-Fi. Right. Perfect. Right, so if we minimize addresses, we have our address groups here. Let me just reload this. Perfect. And you can see all of our subnets are created under the address group. Now, in our policy, we are going to create a new policy. So we go create new, we call this internal to internet. Oh, internet. So the incoming interface is going to be this, which is the port 1 that I would have configured. The outgoing interface is going to be 1.1. The source is going to be the address group that we created, which is the LAN subnet. Destination is going to be all, and the service is going to be all. We're going to have it accept. Inspection mode would be flow-based. And we don't have any security profiles configured. I think by default you have the antivirus, so we could probably, let's edit this and see what it looks like. Yeah, this is fine. So we could actually turn that on. And we log in traffic, we are logging all sessions, and we enable any policy. Okay. And we are going to reorder this policy and put it above this one. So some other things that you could actually look at would be stuff like, these are administrators for your device. The admin profiles would be, for example, if you're a super admin, if you have all the privileges, or if it's a read-only account. HA, which is high availability, is if you want to have a cluster devices for automatic failover. So in the event that a device fails, it would automatically fail over to the secondary device and nobody would know the difference. That happens in a matter of seconds. Feature visibility is where you could enable all the hidden features like your advanced routing, I believe, right. You could actually have a whole separate set of voice configurations. If you require it, you would have stuff like, again, intrusion prevention, web application firewall, and things like that. On the policy and objects, you have traffic shapers. Traffic shapers is basically to policy your traffic to ensure that, for example, if you type to voice, your voice traffic would have preference, and it would make sure that the traffic doesn't suffer in times of congestion. Your security profiles would be antivirus and things like that. Again, by default, you do have stuff configured, but again, some of it would require the licenses to be applied. Yeah, for example, the web filter, it requires a license. Then I went through the VPN already. Your user and device would be if you have user groups for like SL VPN and things like that. You have your radius servers, Wi-Fi and switch controller. I went through that already. That is where you manage if you have a 40 switch or a 40 AP. So that's actually it for this session. In our next session, we are going to configure the remainder of the routing to allow connectivity between the switch and the firewall. And I hope you'll stay tuned for that.